Hey guys, what's up? It's Stacking Chairs, the youth ministry podcast all about serving in youth ministry. Whether it be youth group or youth camp, whatever God has you serving in, that's what we're talking about. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Paul Hamus. I'm joined by my fellow host and good friend,
Kyle Gray. I thought I was doing the intro.
You said you wanted to try? Hey, you try.
No, it's all good. I'm totally joking with you.
Okay.
Hey, so Josh, been a couple of crazy times that I've been gone. I love the guests that you've had on here.
Yeah.
A lot of great conversation and interaction. And we're ready to get the ball rolling back again.
Yeah, it's good to have you back, Kyle.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I feel like you're always somewhere.
I brought some German chocolate.
Yeah, for everyone to
for
taste.
Everybody that is here.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. Have some German chocolate.
You guys, please. So one time my friend talked about Mr. Rogers and he was like, hey, have this apple. And he was like, that's when I started hating Mr. Rogers because I really wanted an apple, but it was on the TV. So I hope you don't start hating me now. But here's what I noticed when I was over in Germany.
Yeah.
For the most part, students are students.
Yeah.
Like their hurts, their frustrations, sitting down and just talking to them. I mean, obviously there's some differences between our culture and their culture. And obviously there's some different things in Europe than here in the United States.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it, every single one of them is looking for hope. Every single one of them is trying to figure out what to do with the hurt that they have in their lives. And it was just crazy. So
yeah. Speaking of crazy.
Hey, speaking of crazy, our guest here today is the camp director of Word of Life Island. Ladies and gentlemen, clap repeatedly, even if you're in your car driving by yourself, for Mr. Tommy Sewall.
What's up? Thanks, guys.
Hey, yeah. Hey, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Flew down just for this.
So Tommy and I met actually when Tommy was a 8, 9, 7. How old were you?
I actually don't remember.
It was.
Oh, wow.
So I don't remember if it was when we met, but how old were you in 2001? Or 2000, December?
11.
So I gave my girlfriend actually my fiance at the time, a special present, and she lost it.
Oh no.
And there were these 4 or 6 kids that were like, we'll find it. And I was like, I don't need these kids.
It was Tommy?
I was one of them, yeah.
And,
That's
and
hilarious.
Tommy and Todd found the key.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a hero.
He was a hero. He genuinely, I was like, this is awesome.
It was the key to Nicola's heart, actually.
It was.
Yeah.
It was Nicola.
It was Nicola.
I'm relieved because you said my fiance at the time, and I was like,
Ooh, spoiler alert.
Yeah, I didn't know this part of Kyle's story.
No. Hey, so I did learn in Germany that they also do awkward turtle like this. They're like,
word. Yeah,
you know what this is?
Turtle.
And I was like, oh, it's awkward turtle. And they're like,
international song.
yes.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, wow. They also do the shut up fox.
Oh yeah.
When you do this,
Yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
it's a shut up fox. They also have the shut up unicorn, but I think it looks like inappropriate. And they're like, no, that's what all of our teachers do. They do.
No way.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. They're
You
like,
should do
that's,
that at camp,
you know,
right?
so you know how like teachers said, when I was growing up, they held up, 2 fingers or the peace sign. They were like, this means be quiet. This means be quiet. And they would go,
Tommy and I grew up
like,
in a different generation. We don't really remember that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So how did your teachers get you to be quiet? Were they like, shut up?
Yeah.
Wow. And you were homeschooled. Hey, so Tommy has done some deep, extensive research.
I wasn't homeschooled. I just want that on the
Just to
record.
clarify.
Josh was.
No, I wasn't. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
So Tommy has done some extensive research into how homeschooling into Gen Z and impacting the youth of today.
Yeah.
And Tommy, you brought up a really good point as we were kind of discussing and going through what we were going to talk about this episode, that the fact of calling Gen Z is not just a label, but there's actually some deep scientific research. Walk us through a little bit of that. And
Yeah. So I, well, just to kind of give you an idea of how I came across really Gen Z, but more than Gen Z, all the generational differences and the science behind it. I had just started working at the Bible Institute up in New York, and we were trying to plan events for the on-campus events for the students.
Yeah.
And there was a list of things that they had done over the years. And so we were just kind of like copy and pasting those events in, and we weren't seeing the same success that we were expecting to see from previous years.
Yeah.
And so we also would sprinkle in some new stuff. And like every now and then, some new idea would just be like super popular, but for no like reason that we could figure out.
Yeah.
And I was actually reading a magazine, and it was talking about this Gen Z, and it was like talking about these points that were just like exactly what I was experiencing in trying to create program for students. And I was like, this is crazy. And it was like quoting this book all throughout the article. And so I ordered that book and read that book, which is called iGen, like little I, capital GEN.
Okay.
Has a very long subtitle that I do not remember. But it's written.
That was half the book, right?
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if the author wishes she gave it a smaller subtitle, because everywhere you see it like quoted, it takes up like 3 lines, you know.
Jeez.
Yeah.
It's the whole forward.
It's written by Jean Twenge, who's a secular author, but she is like the leading researcher of Gen Z.
That's awesome.
So I read this book from her, and I remember coming in every day from work. I'm like a chapter a night guy, and I would come in the next day and be like, you guys aren't going to believe what I just read last night.
Yeah.
Like, you know how we've said this and we've seen this and we've talked about how like this thing is, that's because they're Gen Z, you know, like it was just like, my mind was just blown.
Yeah.
And that launched me on this journey of like, okay, I'm a camp director and I work at a college. All of our campers are Gen Z. All of our college students are Gen Z. And I'm not. I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
So I've got to figure out, I've got to read and study and learn as much as I can. And that's going to help me do my job.
So short little caveat, it is a secular book. So just understand that. But you would highly recommend that they would get it and they would read it.
So I tell everybody it's a secular book and there's explicit language in it. Just like my little, I learned this the hard way because I read it like halfway through and I was like, everybody needs to read this book. Yeah. And then I got to the chapter on sexuality and I was like, uh-oh.
And they're like, great. And that's the day that Tommy got fired.
Yeah. That's the day HR got involved.
Yeah. But no, excellent book. I will say, it's still, if you go pick up any other Gen Z book, it's going to reference that book. So iGen.
And 50,000 word subtitle.
I always tell people, I recommend a different book if you're just getting into Gen Z, and it's called Meet Generation Z by James Emery White.
Okay.
That's the book that I recommend.
Okay.
Because a lot of the books on generational research, it's tons of graphs and it's tons of stats, which that is where they're getting their information from. But that book, Meet Generation Z, it reads a little more like a normal book. So Gen Z is, one of the things I've learned is that in generations, it's not an exact science.
No,
a lot of people disagree on stuff, but generally, students that were born between 1995 and 2012 would be considered Gen Z.
Yeah.
So that's roughly like 11 to 27-year-olds.
Well, I was born in 95. And so
you're Gen Z.
Well, that's the thing. Actually,
how old are you then?
27.
Yeah.
I'll be 28 here. But
so this is another interesting thing. If you're on the front or the back of it, you're like a crossover.
Yeah, that's my thing, because I'm an 80 baby.
Yeah, you're right on the edge of Gen X.
And so I'm right on the edge of Gen X. I was raised by boomers or busters. What comes after?
We talked about this like 2 episodes ago. Yeah,
but
boomers were more recent.
But my mentality is set and defined by so many of them, and yet my culture is like really Gen Z and kind of.
Yeah, so you're taking in Polly's case, I don't know. You got to call Josh on here.
Polly was my nickname in college. That's how Tommy knows me. So, track with us.
In Josh's case.
But how crazy is that? Because then my teenage years, and really when I started to make decisions for myself, were really defined by a millennial mentality.
You're taking, your mentality is your mentality all the way through. So
don't tell me what my mentality
oftentimes we talk about it like lenses. Like you are seeing the world through a set of lenses that we are not. We see things through a different lens. And then with Gen Z, or I guess in Josh's
even being on a cusp yesterday, if I could interject. Yesterday I had a friend of ours who's a staff member who's like 20, he's got to be 21, 22. And he's like, at one point, he's like, oh, you sound like such a millennial. And I was like, because I was taking a hard stance on something. I was like, this is something I believe. This is something that I feel conviction about. And he's like, none of that really matters in the scope of eternity. So he's like, I just don't care about it. And I was like, he's like, because you're a millennial, like you just get hooked on stuff. But that's my perspective. I'm like, I hook onto it. And then if I learn something new, I take in that information, I change my perspective, but I don't just like throw things away. Yeah, I'm so meta. But I guess that's more of a millennial mentality.
You would take some millennial characteristics in with you, and you would have a blend of some Gen Z stuff too. Yeah. My friend Nate is the same way. He's right on the edge. And so it's interesting to see. And after studying it, I can like kind of like watch his life and be like, oh, okay. So he's got this Gen Z characteristic, but he's real strong millennial in this way or whatever.
Yeah. Well, Nate's just a year younger than me. So
right. Yeah. He's right in the same spot. So one of the things that I've just has become a mission of my life is like to say to pastors, to youth leaders, to other people working at camp, like Gen Z is a real thing. I meet a lot of people who are just kind of like
it's just a label.
Kids are kids.
Yeah.
It's just a way that or the other thing the illustration I use is like, because that okay boomer joke was going around.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys know that's just like not all old people, right? Like boomer is a specific age range. Yeah. And a lot of you don't know that age range based on how you use that joke. Yeah. But that's a good example of like, there's actually a group of people that are unique and they see the world differently. Interestingly enough, Gen Z, they often call them Zoomers because they have a lot of boomer characteristics in how they act.
And we were even talking about this the other day about how fashions come back.
Oh yeah.
Trends come back, and the life, the lifespan of a trend. And
watching my friend Luke, you guys know Luke. Watching how Luke dresses always like just blows my mind because I'd be like, this is so fresh, and I'll be like, yeah. He the other
30
day,
years ago.
Well, but the other day he was wearing cow print pants, and I came to his house, and I was like, he's like, I almost changed because I didn't want you to make fun of me, and I was like, dang. I was like, you're right. I was gonna make fun of you, but
and I am gonna make fun of you now.
And that's an interesting thing because to Gen Z, statement pants, is a very popular thing.
Yeah, it's just it's so funny like how that
we're all sitting there going like, why do you have those pants on?
Yeah, and
you know what all the other Gen Zers are thinking? Those are cool pants.
Yeah, that's a statement.
Yeah.
Bold, cool.
Well, okay, so here's the one thing I'm really hoping. Do you remember the like massively large legged pants?
Yeah.
Jinkos. I so hope those do not come back. You could like fit small children under those,
Definitely though, like skinny jeans are out.
Oh yeah. No, for sure. Which is
but
wild.
Here's the crazy thing. So when I went over to Germany, I did not bring, like 4 or 5 years ago, I bought a pair of skinny jeans. They sit in my drawer and I'm always like, what do I do? And I was like, do I bring them? Do I not bring them? And I was like, culturally, I didn't know how they stood on them. And word of life wise, sometimes you're like, I don't really know. I also had jeans with rips in them, which are kind of going out, and yet kind of it's like, and I asked a couple of students the other day, and I was like, are these in or are these not in? And they're like, it depends. I was like, it depends on what.
Yeah.
I didn't bring either of those pairs, and then like halfway through, I said something to one of the staff members. They're like, "Oh, you should have brought your skinny jeans, and that's what everybody's wearing here." And I'm like, that's so crazy that it's like
Europe's usually ahead of us by a couple years.
Typically, they are. But it's like, so my wife...
Word of life, Europe is behind us.
My wife is from the island of Bermuda, and there will be things that like will be phasing out here, but just getting there. And I'm like, but y'all say that?
We're in the
and
middle.
They're like, no. We've got it. And I'm like, no. That's really weird.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about this topic of trends in Gen Z is most Gen Zers would say this to a group of guys like us.
Yeah.
That better than being on trend is you being you. Like they would say, I've had conversations with, and I would say like, do I need to, it's like, no, like if you show up with statement pants on, we're all going to look at you like,
Tommy, why do you have statement pants?
Yeah. Like just be you, like dress like.
Well, so the statement that they're making by wearing pants like that and stuff like that is kind of like, it's a confidence statement of who they are. I'm making a statement of who I am, my confidence. And by us dressing like youth leaders, like we do, like we put confidence in the way that we dress, and we show them like, hey, I don't care how I dress. I just care to be related to you.
That's the only reason why I've kept this mustache, because this mustache is a statement right here. I'm telling you. By the way, if you don't know, if you can't hear my mustache, that's because you're not watching it on our video. You need to go to YouTube.
Word of Life Fellowship.
Word of Life Fellowship YouTube page.
Yeah.
And you can check out Stacking Chairs Vodcast. So Tommy, move the conversation towards youth ministry and camp. I've talked to some different guys that are kind of on this. Is camp still relevant for Gen Z? Is the way that you guys are doing camp still relevant to Gen Z? Spoiler alert, if you don't know, if you come to a Word of Life camp, you don't have your cell phone. And I mean, that is a security blanket, like security blankets for students. And I talk to a lot of guys that are like, dude, if my students don't have phones, like they will have a meltdown. Their parents will have a meltdown. Talk us through what's the research that you have done and the trends that you've seen.
Yeah. So I'll say, I believe that camp will have a greater impact on Generation Z than any previous generation.
Really?
Spiritually.
Wow.
It's harder to get Gen Z to come to camp because they're, as a generation, they'd much rather stay home, stay in their room, by themselves. They prefer a lot of times digital relationships over in-person relationships.
Yeah.
And so it's harder to get them to come. There's a lot more hesitation and anxiety about coming to camp. Whereas millennials were like, let's go, activities all day. Like, what's better than that? They're coming to camp with not quite as excited to do all the activities, but it's going to have a profound impact on them. There's a couple reasons. 3 of the big reasons. One is, you mentioned the cell phones. For Gen Zers, this represents the longest time they'll go without their connections all year. Even you think about, they go to school. If they go to a school where they can't have their phone, they're still getting it back at the end of the day. They're still on it all night. Here it's like they're away from it.
Yeah.
A lot of them do have a hard time at first, but I would say overwhelmingly the students that I talk to say they would put it in the top 3 things that they look forward to about camp.
That's awesome.
Because they know.
Yeah.
They all know it's not healthy.
Yeah.
But they just don't have the discipline. And quite honestly, neither do I.
Sure.
They just don't have the discipline to not have it. And so they get to camp and they just live life, what's in front of them. They're not worried about that. Usually it takes them a couple of days if it's their first time coming to camp. But once they get over that, it's just like, imagine, like we call them screenagers and digital natives. All they've ever known is connectivity. You and I can remember. I remember I went to speak at this camp in Canada, and there was no cell phone service. Plus, it was Canada, so my phone didn't work. And I just remember like sitting there, like, what do I do? This is weird. But in that moment, my mind goes back to the first 22 years of my life
without a cell phone,
without being connected to the internet all the time.
And
I had a cell phone.
I was going to say, I remember. I'm trying to remember.
That old. Yeah.
I think it was all the way until 2000. Let's see, I came here in 2015. I was in Texas in 2006. It was probably 2010 or 11 where I think my first smartphone was the BlackBerry Storm, the one that the screen clicked. But just like how much that has changed. Like it's hard for me to even remember back to my old flip phone.
But in the moment where you're not connected, you have, even if it's subconsciously, you are going, okay, I remember life still works.
Yes.
But they don't know that.
They don't.
Yeah.
Their entire life, they've known constant connectedness.
Yeah.
And so,
that's crazy.
So it takes them a little bit to get over that. But once they're here, it's great. The bigger issue is parents. Parents, I meet youth leaders every single summer who are like, I couldn't bring all my kids because some of them, their parents weren't comfortable with them not having their phone.
We experience that every year.
And I just want to like put my face on my hands and just like, it's so sad. You can get a hold of your child at camp. It's not instant, but you can get a hold of them.
Right.
So it's not like they're going to be, fully cut off from you.
Yeah.
And it's so healthy for them.
Right.
It's healthy for them not to be connected to you instantly, constantly.
And it's healthy for you not to be connected to them.
It is. So I think that's one way that's
pretty bold.
That it'll make a big impact. Is it's already helping them.
Yeah.
The second is, the second way is the relationship with the counselors is different now than it used to be because it represents one of very, very few relationships they have that is only what they know in person.
Yeah.
There's no digital aspect to it.
Yeah.
They're not going online and checking out your Instagram or checking out what you're posting on Snapchat or what your YouTube following is.
Yeah.
All they know is what's in front of them.
Yeah.
And it forces them to build a relationship that way.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so also, and this has been true for a long time. One of the things that is when you meet somebody who's close to your age, but loves Jesus, loves you, there's just this like really interesting bond that happens there that lets them they instantly kind of open up and let them into their life. And so that's continuing to happen. But now that's one of very few relationships like that in their life.
I've also noticed that, and we've had actually some really interesting phone calls with some people, because in that meet and greet time that normally, you meet your counselor, you share a little bit with them, you share enough to kind of connect with them. But then it's like Wednesday or Thursday, you're like, all right, floodgates open. Okay, and maybe you don't even really fully open up to them and share this deep, dark hurt until like the end of the week. Campers are now sharing that day one. Day one. Like there's a story, and I'm pretty sure I told you this, kid's going around. Hey, tell me a little about yourself. Oh, my name's Kyle. And, I play sports. And oh, that's cool. Hey, my name's Tim and I'm non-binary. Oh, you too? Oh, man. Hey, I'm a homosexual. It's like, and you're like, the stuff that some of these kids that so much of culture, and let's be honest, so much of Christian culture is like, whoa, you don't. They're like, now this is who I am. Do you think that's part of because I'm meeting somebody face to face and I'm ready to share with you my life? Or where do you think that comes from?
I think it's two things. I think, first of all, we feel like now, and I'll use a example of an Instagram bio. You feel like the things that are in your Instagram bio, they don't know. They're not practiced at meeting strangers and introducing themselves. Yeah. They have an Instagram that helps them with that. You know what I mean? So some of the stuff that you would put in your bio, they feel like they need to throw out there right away. Yeah. And your sexual, your orientation is right there. Yeah. And for a lot of Gen Z,
your pronouns,
Yeah. And, or if you struggle with this or that, a lot of times that's right there. So they're not practiced at that. They don't know better. They're just like,
this is who I am.
Yeah. And in some cases, they're proud of that. They've let that become their identity. And so they're not afraid to talk about that. Like you and I would be like, that's not something you lead with, they're not afraid of that. And that's part of the reason why they see millennials as disingenuous.
Right.
Because we don't lead with that. Yeah. We lead with like, how's the sports team doing?
Yeah.
It's like, I get to the deep stuff later.
I feel like that's where I dive into Gen Z a little bit then, because I do share like some more intimate. I mean, I know times where my wife's been like, Josh, you're sharing way too much information. Like I remember once the stewardess asked us like why we were going to Argentina. And I was like, oh, well, my wife and I just got married. We're really going to like see it. I started going on this whole thing. She's like, Josh, shut up. She doesn't care. Like,
yeah.
Like, do you want to give her your social security?
Right. Yeah. No, that's definitely a
sure. I asked you, do you want a glass of Coke or water?
Like ice? Yeah. And I'm like, well, here's something really interesting about the fourth grade.
And earlier today, we had a massive fight and she said this and it really hurt me and it brought up this memory that.
Yeah. One thing I'll just say about this quickly, because I want to talk about the third thing too. Yeah. But I've noticed as I have, wanted to create relationships with Gen Z students, try to build like discipleship relationships is, if I hesitate to go to talk about real life with them and I keep it up, kind of in the shallows, it doesn't go anywhere.
It turns them off.
Yeah. As soon as and it's very uncomfortable for me. Generational thing. Yeah. It's not comfortable for me as a millennial to be like, I just met you and I want to talk about what I was struggling with earlier today. But when I do that, when I overcome that awkwardness, I see those relationships just be fruitful so quickly.
That's so funny. So I got to speak at chapel here for our Bible Institute the other day. And I know I'm an emotional guy already. I know I'm very passionate about different stuff, but I hate being the guy that like, people are like, okay, when's Kyle going to start crying in his message? But I was just sharing about something and I shared about a hurt and a kid came up to me afterwards and he goes, dude, I love how raw you get sometimes. And I said, yeah, but sometimes I feel like I don't need to go to that spot. And he goes, no, it's good for us to see. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
Here I'm thinking like, I don't want them to think it's a performance. I don't want them to be like, okay, when's Kyle going to cry because it's a performance? He was like, no, we can tell this is a real thing. And I was like, that's wild.
Gen Z is very distrusting of authority, of institutions, organizations. And when we are too polished, which is again, it's so weird because as a millennial, I'm like, dude, if you're not polished, people are going to just be like, who is this guy? Like he's sloppy or lazy or, but they actually, if you're too polished, they're going to look at that with kind of a raised eyebrow.
So I made a change.
Is this an ad?
So I made a change and I realized it the other day. I used to try to memorize my messages so that I didn't have to look at my notes. And I've noticed they pay attention a little bit more when it doesn't look like I've got this act memorized and I've got this, but I'm going back and referring to my note. Oh, hey, let me, that's crazy. I feel like you're saying something and I'm like, wait a second, the dots are connecting and there,
That happened the other day. I did a message for a co-op. They had like a chapel at their co-op. And so I went over and was speaking to them. And the kid afterward, one of them just came up and he's like, I wish you'd come and speak more often. I feel like you actually like speak to us and you're not just speaking over us. And like, just like opening up. And I was just like talking about service. I was just talking about service, like something really simple, but I just was very like raw with them about we're doing the documentary about Ukraine. And so I was talking about like, hey, service in the midst of like really like terrible hardship.
Cell phone service?
Yeah. Cell phone service. Yeah.
Gen Zers is like, oh yeah.
Cell phone service.
Yeah.
No, but speaking to them
5G?
and just being intentional about like connecting with them there, it just made a difference. And if I had, it's just some of the older guys who had come through before, I guess, were just kind of like doing these over their head kind of things. And it just so different.
All right.
So the third thing I'll say is Gen Z they're an advocate for mental health. It's one of their defining characteristics. Tragically, though, it's because the reason why they are such advocates for it is because it's taking an enormous toll on their generation. Mm-hmm. Suicide's the second leading cause of death for Generation Z. Mm-hmm. So they're struggling with mental health in a really crazy way. And they need help. It's part of why they're opening up to their counselors right away. They are desperately looking for mentorship, for coaching, for somebody that can help them navigate life.
Yeah.
So the way that camp, there's several ways that we help with this in camp. For example, last summer, we talked a lot about mental health. We talked about it. We talked about suicide and we gave a lot of attention to it. But I'll say even more generically than that, science has proven that being outside and doing activity is good for your mental health.
Yeah.
So the way I explain it to people is the average Gen Zer spends 6 to 8 hours a day on some sort of screen. And at camp, we replace that 6 to 8 hours a day on a screen with 8 hours outside.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And on that metric alone, campers are going to leave camp feeling better with their mental health having improved because they have been outside, they've done activity, and they have not been on their screens.
Yeah.
And so, especially when I'm talking to parents, that's a big selling point that I use. It's like, they're going to feel better.
Yeah.
Science, and it's a science thing. It's not just like a hunch, there's a lot of research that backs this up, specifically actually around camps. They used summer camps as the test for this.
Wow.
They sent kids to a camp where there was no screens, and they sent kids to a camp where they were allowed to have their screens. And at the end of it, the kids that had no screens were all happier, it's hard to,
I want you to be happier. I want you.
They were all happier after their time at camp with us.
So how, you're a youth pastor listening to this thing, you're a youth leader listening to this thing. How does this not just come off like, well, of course you're going to say this, Tommy, you're a camp director and you're just like every other news media outlet that takes the stats and skews them in your direction. What would you say to those people as to no, this is why you need to get your kids not just at a camp, but at Word of Life camp that,
Well, I would say part of what I'm trying to do here is give the reason first, right? Like, getting outside, doing activity improves mental health. We do that at camp, and relationships, in-person relationships that are absent of a digital component where somebody cares about them and, loves them. That's powerful.
Yeah.
We have that at camp.
Yeah.
And the first one I said with being disconnected, again, like the science of it is not being on your phone, removing distractions. Students want that. even if they don't verbalize it that way, they're, you know what I mean? So like, I want to present to you, these are the facts. This is the information. And I'm just showing you how camp's connected to that. There are other ways to accomplish those things as well. And that's why I would suggest study up, read on Gen Z.
Yeah.
What I try to do, because I know there's so many books out there to read, and there's so many areas that I need to grow in. And so what I've tried to do is create a rotation. So I'll read like a book about same-sex attraction, or I just read one called Embodied by Preston Sprinkle that's really good, all about gender. Then I'll read a book on leadership or you know, something that's going to help me be a better leader. Then I'll read a book on Gen Z or on something, you know, could be a kind of an offshoot of it, but I'll read a book that's going to help me grow in that way. Yeah. And I circle back around and I start the process over. And that's kind of, because I always want to be growing in that. And so I would say add some Gen Z reading into your rotation. Well, the book that I would recommend, actually I'm going to have to look it up because I'm going to get the name wrong. Sure. But we haven't really gotten deep into this, but I think worldview is a huge thing for Gen Z. I think even the kid that grows up in the most Christian home, even though homes don't have souls and they can't be saved, to use some Christianese. I think even the most Christian home, you know, kid still has a secular worldview. And that's a Gen Z thing.
Part to operate from a secular worldview.
I mean, not exclusively, right? Like there's plenty of millennials with secular worldviews. The thing that I think is a Gen Z thing is, and I'll use myself as an example. I grew up in a Christian home. I attended a Christian school. My parents controlled, I'm just kind of making this number up, but generally speaking, I would say they probably controlled 80% of the worldview influence that was in my life. Through church, through my school, through their influence. And so there was 20% that I was getting from the outside world, from the one TV show I was allowed to watch a week. You know, from
Family
the
Feud, right?
occasional like radio that I heard on the school bus ride home or something. But I think now, even in the most conservative Christian home, that number's probably flipped. They probably control maybe 20% of the worldview influence, and 80% of what they're getting is secular.
Well, as soon as they get on here, and as soon as they get on any social media, which is why we tell you parents to just be proactive and know where your students are. And know what apps your students are on and have conversations with them, create a culture of openness and of conversation. Josh, how many times have we watched a student fall on their face or parents just be broken because they've tried to snuff out and realize, just like all of us, you had stuff you hid from your parents. They got stuff. So, but when you don't create a place of a conversation, your kids aren't going to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. Actually, we just talked about that at youth group this past Wednesday. Matt was talking about, so I work with a youth group, but I work with a youth pastor who, you know, leads the youth group. So he spoke on biblical marriage and a worldview on biblical marriage and like biblical relationships. And sitting down afterwards, he's like, you know, your parents get to dictate when you should start dating. Here's our suggestion. Like, maybe you shouldn't start dating at 14 years old. This is why we think so. Talk to your parents. And so then during small group, I was sitting there with the guys and we were kind of going over some of the stuff we talked about. And I was like, guys, your parents would love to talk to you about this stuff. If you don't feel comfortable talking to them about it, tell them that, like, hey, I want you to feel comfortable talking about this because it's important to me. Because you need to have these conversations with your parents. And so some of you might not feel comfortable, but take that, like, what's the word I'm looking for? That vulnerability that you're looking for and communicate that you want it. And I think your parents will come alongside you then, and they will find ways to build into that.
If you're a parent that's watching this, the best advice that I could give you is when your student asks you for help in an area that you don't feel confident answering, just say, I'm not sure. Let me look it up.
Let's look into that together.
Let's figure this out together. That will go so far than you trying to like, oh, well, you know, I think.
But how countercultural is that to
millennials?
The way that we were raised, or the way that you guys were raised, of the leaders, you always had the answer. And if you didn't have the answer, you never admitted the weakness that you didn't have it all together.
Right. So true. Well, and it's very different too. Like the stuff that I was exposed to that I could even have talked to my parents about was nothing compared to what it is now.
Right.
They call Gen Z the Google It generation, and it's so fascinating. Their brains are developing differently for the first time ever because they can access the answer to literally any question in the world as fast as they can type it out. And so I always say, if you aren't willing to talk to your students about it, the internet is. And that should scare you.
Yeah. Say that again.
If you aren't willing to talk to your students about it, the internet is.
Yeah.
Most likely they've already looked it up on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm saying, I hate this because there's things I don't want to have to talk to students about.
So now your son growing up, like, how do you not run to these massive places of panic of don't even own an iPad? And,
we're actually moving to an island where there's going to be no contact with the outside world.
The word of life island.
Yeah.
We will bring you a mate when we see find the suitable.
So I could go on and on, but I really want to say, so this book by Sean McDowell and J. Warner Wallace, it's called So the Next Generation Will Know. And if you're a youth leader or a youth pastor or anybody who teaches students, this is, I think, such a great resource because it really, Sean McDowell's always just been a great guy to talk about worldview, but he makes a great case for worldview and how we talk about worldview. And one of the things I love about what he talks about is, so we were just talking about how like so much worldview is coming through the phone, and he teaches you how to help your students process that. Yeah. So it's not that you can't go watch, I think Sean McDowell's super into comic books. It's not that you can't go watch Avengers, but just know that when you watch it, be aware that this is a worldview that they're promoting. Right. And you can process that and then you can just set it over here versus if you go into it without considering that, then you're like subtly eating it, and that's going to over time build up. I will say to youth leaders and parents too, like, so if you're concerned, and you should be about that 80% of the worldview that you're not influencing and only that 20%, you can counteract that because that 80%, to use Avengers as an example, the goal of Avengers is not to promote a secular worldview. Yeah. It's to sell movies, right? Right. Yeah. It's just being promoted in there because it is. That's the people who made it and wrote it. They have a secular worldview. And so that's all they know. So you can counteract, Avengers is long. You say, oh, well, how long is Avengers? 2 hours?
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. They go, oh, well, I don't have 2.5 hours to sit and talk with my student about worldview. I'm saying you don't have to, because that's 2.5 hours of like 5% worldview. Right. So if you take 2 minutes of 100% worldview with something like the Word Life Quiet Time Diary or New Morning Mercies is another thing I read. I know you've read it. Yep. Like that is pure biblical worldview. And so that 5 minutes counteracts a lot of that other 80% that's just subtle. Because they're most of the time they're not interacting with people who are actively trying to promote a secular worldview. It's just out there. It's just what it is. But if you don't do anything to counteract it, it builds up over time.
So it comes down to putting time in. I mean, if you're a youth leader, if you're a parent, if you're a pastor, whatever you are, it comes down to putting in time, not putting in a program. Right. If you throw your kid into some kind of program or make them watch some video, it's nothing compared to building the relationship and taking the time.
Well, and this goes back, and I don't think we have the time to discuss this, but this goes back to another thing that you said before we got started, which I think we need to talk about at some point, which is the whole students are less interested in Christianity, but more interested in Jesus.
Yeah, let's end with this because I think this
is like brings so much hope. And let me just say too, there's a lot of hope around Gen Z. Yeah. I pray every day for a revival for Gen Z. And I believe it can happen. Yeah. And I could give you a whole list of like just awesome things. I'll just give you an example. Gen Z, when they care about something, they make it happen. Yeah. And you know how I know? Cancel culture. I mean, goodness. A couple years ago, nobody survived. Everybody got canceled. Yeah. And you know what that was? Certainly there was other generations involved, but it was Gen Z rallying online where they live, where the thing that they're native to, and they were taking down corporations. Yeah. Think about if they had that energy around the gospel. Oh, yeah. The other thing I'll tell people all the time is like, if you go back in time 15 years, and I were to tell you, there's a middle schooler over here who every week speaks to millions of people. You'd be like, Justin Bieber, that's the only one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Those are the two middle schoolers that spoke to millions.
Yeah.
And now it's like, how many middle schoolers have YouTube followings where all they're doing is unboxing toys?
Yeah.
Seriously.
And millions of people.
My boys are like, can we have a YouTube channel? What do you want for Christmas? I want a YouTube channel. And I'm like, why? Because the idea of us being known was like this fantasy that will never happen. Students today, you even do something stupid and somehow you're worldwide known. Like genuinely, there's times I'm like, oh man, I'm sure there's some videos out there. Like I was in Germany and they introduced me in a thing and I got up and I made a joke about that. And my wife just hangs her head and I said, well, that's the first time I've done that from stage. And a guy goes, we're recording these. And I was like, oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah. Online influencer is like the number one thing they want to be.
Yeah.
Like, that's so all that to say, they have an incredible opportunity to spread the name of Jesus. And this research has just come out that Barna did. And I actually haven't read the book yet. But I was in a Gen Z summit the other day and they were kind of showing some of these stats that Generation Z is post-Christian. It's the first generation that's ever happened. More people identify as no religious affiliation than Christian.
Yeah.
Previous to that, every generation, the majority of them checked
I'm a Christian.
next to Christian.
Well, growing up, you could say, well, I'm a Christian, and people are like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian too. And now if I tell a neighbor like, oh, I'm a Christian, the older generation will say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. The younger people like my age even are like, oh, I'm not.
Yeah, I'm nothing.
Yeah. Like I had
Most common answer.
Yeah. No, we had a Halloween thing we did with our church at our house.
What?
I know. We did a harvest thing that we did at our house.
Praise God. Hallelujah.
Our church.
Hallelujah party.
So I'm there and these people kept coming by and some older people and I would like say, hey, here's some candy. We'd give whole handfuls of candy and be like, actually, we also, we're doing like a party here with our church. We also have some information. If you guys be interested, we have kids programs stuff. So many people said no. They're just like, no, thank you. Not interested. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. And I talked to some of the other people who hosted the same parties at their house and they'd be like, well, we just tied it around the candy and just dropped it in because people weren't going to say yes.
Right.
I think we gave about 9 out of the however many people that came through. And it was just people were like, yeah, I guess so. And they'd take it, but they were not interested. And then the people that I stopped and talked to, I had 2 neighbors who I stopped and got to meet for the first time, which I was thrilled about. And when I talked to them, I made this connection about like, they were talking about the Comic-Con that they wanted to go to because I was dressed as a Jedi. So they were like, oh, you should come to Comic-Con with us. And I was like, well, I'm nerdy, but I don't know if I'm like Comic-Con nerdy yet. Let's see. But I'm talking to them and I'm building this relationship and they just were not interested in Christianity at all. And like, they made it very clear, yeah, we're not religious at all. But growing up, it was like, oh yeah, people would make excuses to like say, well, I go to church. I went to church, or hey, I watched the live stream is something I heard recently from an older person. Like, oh, I watched the live stream this morning kind of thing. But the younger people my age are like, I don't care. I don't care that you know that I'm not a Christian.
Right.
It's very different.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And that's a big thing is no religious affiliation. And this is where what you were just talking about, this research that's just come out internationally, Barna did this, it's all around the world. Gen Z is interested in who Jesus is. They have respect for Jesus. That's awesome. They are interested in what did he say? What were his teachings?
Yeah.
It's apparent that he was a significant historical figure and they're interested in wisdom. Like that's what they're looking for is help. They need help navigating life. And so on that basis alone, it's not like they're not saying that Jesus is God, but they're at least interested in tell me more about Jesus.
Yeah, right.
Why is he such a significant historical figure? And what did he say? So I think that's really fascinating. And that gives me great hope for what we do at camp for youth ministries. It's like, okay, well, if we could pick one inroad, it would probably be Jesus. And Gen Z's like, yeah, tell us more about Jesus. Like, yes.
Yeah. Because Christianity is an institution and they want to tear down and rebuild. I mean, this deconstructionism.
Which again, that's what we need to get back to instead of just this, you follow this list of rules because that's what literally the other night I was at youth group with the youth group that I help out with. And one of the leaders was like, why do we have the door shut? And I looked at them square in the face and I said, I don't know. I've been here the shortest, but can I tell you why I think? And they're like, yeah. I said, because we've always shut them. Yeah. Why don't we open the doors until this time exactly? Because that's what we've always done. There's not really like a good idea about it. And so that's why, listen, again, if you don't know, and if you haven't checked out Word of Life Snow Camp, Word of Life Pursuit Camp, Word of Life Island, Word of Life The Coast, listen, we would love to partner with you. We're not trying to take something from you. We want to partner with you and help you reach these students, put tools in your toolboxes, put resources in your hands as you are trying to reach this generation. Word of Life Youth Ministries. You can have a missionary come to your church and help provide tools and training and help and resources. The Word Life Quiet Time, like Tommy was talking about, again, helping that student to have a daily personal relationship with Jesus. Mm-hmm. This is also why, guys, and I've been so bold to say this before, this is why I believe with all my heart, when all you do is your own things, you're building an institution and you're getting your kids to think your church has all the answers. So what happens when they don't believe in institutions? That's why I believe it is so important for you to allow other things. And you go, oh, so the answer is always Word of Life. Well, obviously, because we work for Word of Life. But no, there are other incredible godly camps out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing I can't tell you, sign off on what they're going to tell you. I can tell you, sign off on what we're going to tell you.
Sure.
And how we're going to partner with you and send your kids back to you with tools and resources to share Christ with their world, to grow closer in their walk with Jesus Christ. And again, most beautiful, you don't have to do it all yourself. You don't have to put it all together yourself or organize it all together yourself. So, hey, Josh, I think it's time. Let's head on over to small group.
There you go.
Small group is a time where we might share a funny story or an anecdote or something that happened in the past.
And we put on music that's been called youth group elevator music.
Is that what this is?
Yeah, it's a youth group elevator music.
Hey, in small groups, it's good to have snacks.
I actually was going to eat this, but
You're about to talk
way back here.
Hey, so you don't want the...
Yeah, guys, we're eating German chocolate. So.
Yeah. So Tommy, you were a program guy. One of my favorite things is that you and I talk about how for years program guys didn't do anything, and now you and I as previous program guys are getting to lead things and be a part of it. But you've definitely seen a lot. You've seen the underbelly of the whale. There has to be some awkward, funny stories.
What a graphic word image.
Thank you. Well, it's Nineveh, Jonah, of course, is where I was going. Biblical. You got to know a story or two about something funny or crazy that happened at Word of Life Island.
I mean, goodness gracious. That place is just like held up out of the water on the backs of stories. But
I'm pretty sure that's what original Pine Pavilion was built on.
Yes. Just good old stories.
Jack Wharton built that place by himself is what
and that's why it collapsed.
Yeah.
Not because of Jack, because of the stories.
True story. One time when I was on the island in 1999,
long time ago.
When we were there, in my first year summer, I went under Pine Pavilion, and I did not go under very long because literally there were buckets and cinder blocks that were holding that thing up and in place.
Oh my word.
Crazy.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
So talk to us. Tell us.
Okay, so one story that I actually have not told this story very often. It was right after I became the director of the island, the first summer that I was the director. We have this huge boat. It's how we get vehicles to and from the island.
Yeah.
Buses, dump trucks, and in order to see over buses and dump trucks, you have to have kind of like this real high place where you drive it from. And so I had some friends up. It was the weekend, camp's not running. We took the ferry out into the middle of the lake, and you can jump off the roof. It's actually pretty high.
Sure.
Tons of fun, and you're in the middle of the lake.
25 feet at least, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's deep, the lake's deep.
Yeah.
So we go out there, we jump off, we have tons of fun, we drive it back in and park it. That's on Saturday. Monday morning, one of the secretary comes into my office and she's like, a lady called from the town. She wants to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, great. Usually it's like, hey, one of your staffers stole a candy bar or, was begging out in front of our store,
Right.
So
I want to hear that story sometime. Jeez.
It's under Pine Pavilion forever. So I'm like, okay, transfer over. So I'm like, hello. She's like, we love the island. We love watching the boats go across. She's like, we're just worried. We think on Saturday someone might have stole your your barge because we were sitting in our house and we saw it. It didn't go in its normal spot. And then people got on the roof and were jumping off. Oh my goodness. Wow.
No way.
I was like, well, you know what? I will find out who that was, and I will make sure that does not happen again. She's like, thank you. I just thought you'd wanted it.
Oh, man.
I thank you so much. I was like, we are better because we have people like you out there that are helping us out.
Which
is definitely true. That part's definitely true.
I spoke directly to the people that.
Wow.
Yeah. Instantly.
Good word.
Was there a moment you looked at yourself in the screen and were like, Tommy, you should not. That's crazy. Oh, man. I love moments like that. I love opportunities like that. How you dealing with the Liberty Bell? I know it's still gone. Is that wound still fresh? Is that
were you the one who originally cracked it? What happened?
Well, so we hadn't used it for a long time because we couldn't. I put it back in and turned it into a pirate ship.
Liberty, I don't know what you're talking about. What's Liberty Bell?
Wait, are you kidding me?
Dude, I didn't
Gen Z.
I didn't come to Word Life until 2013. So
you remember the pirate ship?
Vaguely.
That used to be like a big
wheel boat, like a showboat with the whatever.
Paddle wheel.
Oh.
Yeah. It wasn't real, but it was this big boat.
Yeah.
Like super. Anyways, I turned it into a pirate ship, which was super cool.
I do know about that. Yeah.
But then it broke free. It got on shore, and we had to throw it away.
Yeah.
Which I'm so sad about to this day.
Yeah.
We had to throw it away?
Well,
depends who you ask.
It looked like that.
Oh, okay.
Very similar to the
Playmobil version.
The Playmobil version. All right, guys, that's been small group, and that has been Stacking Chairs. I think it's time to go now. My daughter's here, and some of my friends are watching her for me right now, which is very generous of them. Yeah.
Wow. Hey, I'm so glad we stuck right to the time we set out.
Yeah, I know. And that's why we said 30 minutes.
Listen,
30
there's
minutes.
a lot to talk about with this.
Yeah.
Again, we don't want to finish the conversation. We just want to begin conversations.
Yeah.
Guys, we want to put tools in your toolbox. You can reach out to Tommy at, do you mind giving your email address?
No, not at all. It's Sewall, TSEWALL @WOL.org. I'd be happy to set up a Zoom call, talk about Gen Z. Yeah. I can send you a whole resource list of books and podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
Guys, again, we want to just be a help and a ministry to you and a connection to you.
Yeah.
So whether you're in youth group or in youth ministry, you've got youth around you that you can impact with the love and the hope of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
There's so much to be sad about, but there's so much to be hopeful about. And so get out there, love them for Jesus, share them Jesus, show them Jesus. But most importantly,
stack the chairs.
Stack those chairs.